I told him I wanted to explore my options, and in that instant the air thinned. Ethan's eyes, warm and calm, only seconds ago turned glassy, almost unfamiliar. He didn't yell. He didn't ask why. He just stared, as if trying to memorize the person standing in front of him before she disappeared. I tried to explain how it wasn't about leaving, but about finding myself. But it sounded hollow, even to me. I thought honesty would set us free. Instead, it built a wall we couldn't climb. That night, I slept in silence beside him, our bodies inches apart, our hearts separated by the truth we'd both demanded. The clock ticked past midnight, each second a reminder that something sacred had cracked. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself love could survive curiosity. But I didn't know honesty had a cost. The next morning, I woke to find his side of the bed cold. His shoes were gone, his jacket missing. I sat in the quiet, waiting for a sound that never came. The sunlight felt wrong, too clean for what we'd done to each other. I tried to call him, but the ringtone felt like punishment. It wasn't anger I heard in his silence, it was surrender. And somehow, that hurt worse. I told myself he just needed space, but deep down, I knew space was just another word for distance we might never close again. He texted me that night, "I need time." That was it. No anger, no questions. Just distance compressed into 2 words. I read it over and over, feeling both guilt and freedom crawl beneath my skin. I'd wanted honesty, but now it felt like exposure. Raw, cold, irreversible. I scrolled through our old photos, looking for proof that we were still real. But love, I realized, doesn't vanish in one night. It lingers like smoke. You can't see it, but you can still choke on it. My friends told me I was brave, that wanting more didn't make me cruel. But bravery felt like a lie when every song, every corner of my apartment whispered his name. I told them I needed to rediscover myself, but all I found was silence that didn't want to be shared. I kept wondering if he'd ever understand that I didn't leave because I stopped loving him, but because I wanted to know who I was beyond his love. It's strange how endings echo. Every time I close my eyes, I still see his face that night. Calm, but broken, like a man learning to breathe through grief. I wonder if he hates me now. I wonder if he still looks for me in crowds. I tell myself I did the right thing, but if I'm honest, I didn't want freedom. I wanted him to fight for me. I wanted proof that I was still worth staying for. A week passed. No calls, no explanations, just silence, long and heavy like winter air. I told myself I was fine, that I needed this distance to think, to breathe. But truthfully, every quiet morning without him felt like waking up underwater. I started going for long walks, pretending to enjoy the solitude, but my mind always found its way back to that night. I replayed his face when I said the words, the flicker of confusion before the pain set in. Maybe he thought I'd already chosen someone else. Maybe, deep down, I was afraid he'd be right. He didn't block me, didn't delete the photos. He just stopped existing in the small ways that used to fill my days. No good morning texts, no random memes at midnight. It was eerie, how easily love can vanish from the digital world while still haunting the real one. I checked his profile more times than I'll ever admit, scrolling through pictures of him smiling with friends, trying to decide if that was real joy or the kind that hurts to hold. Freedom tastes strange when you don't know what to do with it. I went on a date. He was kind, funny, attentive. But the whole time, I found myself comparing his every move to Ethan's. The way he smiled wasn't the same. The way he listened wasn't the same. I realized then that exploring my options wasn't about finding someone new. It was about discovering the hollow inside me, the space I'd mistaken for possibility. Ethan finally texted me. Just one line, "Hope you're okay." I stared at it for hours. I wanted to say I missed him. I wanted to say I wasn't okay. but I typed him fine and hit send before my heart could change its mind. Sometimes love doesn't die. It just learns how to pretend. After that text, he disappeared again. But something had shifted. Knowing he still thought of me, even for a second, kept me breathing. I started to write more in my journal, little letters I'd never sent. I wrote about missing him in places he'd never think to look. About how I still felt his ghost in my apartment. About how love, once released, never really leaves. It just changes form. Like smoke curling into the sky, impossible to grasp but impossible to ignore. Months passed. The silence between us had hardened into habit. I told everyone I'd moved on, and maybe part of me had. But there were nights when I still reached for the other side of the bed before remembering it was empty. I started a new job, met new people, smiled when I was supposed to. But every now and then, I'd catch my reflection and wonder who I was trying to convince, them or myself. It's strange how heartbreak doesn't scream. It lingers quietly, polite, like an uninvited guest who refuses to leave. Ethan started seeing someone new. Her name was Claire. I found out the way everyone finds out, through mutual friends and a tagged photo. They looked happy, and I wanted to feel happy for him. But all I felt was a dull ache that wouldn't fade. I stared at that photo for too long, comparing, dissecting, wondering what she had that I didn't. And then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I realized how much I still cared for a life that didn't belong to me anymore. I saw him for the first time in months. By accident, of course. We were both at the same art exhibit downtown. He was with Claire, and I was with a friend who wasn't really a date. Our eyes met across the room. For a heartbeat, time folded. I could feel everything. The love, the anger, the things left unsaid. He smiled, polite, distant. I nodded back, pretending that my hands weren't shaking. Sometimes closure isn't a conversation. It's a look you survive. After seeing him, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how easy it seemed for him to move on. How unfair it was that he looked happy while I was still trying to make sense of everything. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about him anymore. It was about me, about how I'd mistaken pain for proof of love. I wanted to forgive him for moving on, and maybe forgive myself for not being ready to. By the end of that month, I stopped checking his social media. I deleted our old messages, not out of anger, but mercy. I realized I didn't want to erase him. I just didn't want to live in the echo. Maybe that's what growth really is. Not forgetting, but finally accepting that some love stories don't end. They just find quieter ways to exist inside you. Grief changes shape over time. It becomes quieter, more cunning. Some days I almost forget him. Until a scent, a song, a corner of a cafe reminds me. I tell myself it's normal, that you don't unlove someone just because you're no longer allowed to. It's strange, though. I wanted space. And now that I have it, all I feel is distance. The kind that doesn't heal but hums beneath everything, waiting to be remembered. Ethan reached out again. Just a voice note this time. His tone steady, almost casual. Hope you're doing well, Lena. But buried inside that short message was everything we hadn't said. I played it twice, memorizing the rhythm of his breathing between words. I wanted to reply, to say I missed him, to ask if he still thought about that night. But I didn't. Some ghosts only stay peaceful if you don't call their names. He said he was happy. That Claire was good for him, that she made him laugh again. I told him I was happy too, and for a moment, I almost believed it. But when I hung up, the silence came rushing back. I realized then that we'd both built new lives on top of the ruins of us, pretending they were foundations instead of cover-ups. Maybe that's how people move on. Not by forgetting, but by learning how to live with the echo. I started dreaming about him again. Not the real him. the version that only existed in memories. In my dreams, we were back in our old apartment, laughing about nothing, cooking dinner, stealing kisses between songs. When I woke up, I'd lie there for a while, letting the dream fade slowly so I could pretend it was real a little longer. Some mornings, it felt like I was cheating on my own healing. Closure isn't a door you shut. It's a window you learn to stop looking through. One evening, I walked past the bar where we first met. The lights were different, the music louder, the people younger. But when I saw a couple laughing in the corner booth we once claimed, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't pain this time. It was gratitude. The quiet kind that doesn't need forgiveness to exist. It had been almost a year when I saw him again. Not through a screen, not in a memory, but in the flesh. We were at a mutual friend's engagement party. The kind of event where smiles are forced and nostalgia hides under small talk. When I turned and saw him across the room, the noise around me faded. He looked older, calmer, but his eyes still carried that quiet storm I once called home. I didn't know whether to run or walk over. I just stood there, wondering if he'd feel the same pull I did, that impossible gravity of unfinished love. He walked up slowly, like he was afraid I might disappear if he moved too fast. We talked about work, mutual friends, the weather, everything but what mattered. But beneath every word, there was an ache neither of us could hide. He laughed, that same soft laugh that used to make my heart race. And for a second, it felt like no time had passed, like the pain had been a dream, and this was where we'd always belong. He told me Claire couldn't make it, said she was out of town. I nodded, pretending not to feel relief. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. But the longer we stood there, the more dangerous it felt. Every laugh, every shared glance, was a thread pulling us back to something we both swore we'd left behind. It wasn't love that scared me. It was how easy it was to fall back into it. When the night ended, he walked me to my car. The city was quiet, the air cold enough to sting. We stood there for a moment that lasted too long, the kind of silence heavy with everything we didn't say. I could have told him I still thought about him. I could have told him I was sorry. Instead, I said, "It was good to see you." He smiled that gentle, heartbreaking smile and said, "Yeah, you too." And that was all. The door closed. The engine started. But something in me refused to move. I drove home, replaying every second. The way he looked at me. The way his voice softened when he said my name. I thought I'd buried those feelings, but they'd just been waiting for permission to resurface. I knew I couldn't text him. I knew what that would mean. But when I got home, I opened my phone anyway and typed 3 words. "I miss you." I stared at them until the screen dimmed. Then I hit delete. Maybe some love isn't meant to return. Maybe it's meant to remind you that you're still capable of feeling something that deep. It started with a message I wasn't supposed to answer. "Can we talk?" That was all he wrote. I told myself I wouldn't reply, that I was stronger now. But before I could think twice, I typed, "When and where?" He said, "The cafe near your place. Tomorrow." My heart didn't race. It roared. I didn't know what I was walking toward, closure or chaos. But I knew I couldn't keep pretending I didn't want to see him again. When I walked into the cafe, he was already there. Same seat, same coffee order. He smiled, small and cautious, like he wasn't sure he still had permission. The first few minutes were awkward, filled with the clinking of cups and words that didn't matter. Then he said, "You look good," and something in me cracked. It wasn't the compliment, it was the familiarity. The way it sounded like home. We talked for hours, the way we used to. Freely, fearlessly, like time had folded in on itself. He told me about Claire, about how they'd grown distant. I told him about my writing, about the people I'd dated, but never loved. At some point, our laughter softened into silence. He looked at me and said, "You're the one I still compare everyone to." I didn't know what to say. My chest ached with every unspoken answer. When he walked me out, the night air was cold enough to sting. We stood by my car again, just like before, full circle. I wanted to tell him that I still loved him, that I'd never stop. But then he whispered, "If we do this, we'll break again." I nodded, even though my heart screamed otherwise. He leaned in, forehead against mine, just breathing. No kiss, no promises, just truth. And in that fragile silence, I realized love doesn't always need to return to exist. Sometimes it just needs to be seen one last time. He didn't kiss me that night. He didn't need to. When I got home, I sat in the dark, heart still trembling. I realized what that moment meant, not the start of something new, but the end of pretending. For the first time, I didn't cry. I just breathed. Because maybe love isn't always about staying. Maybe sometimes the bravest thing we can do is finally let go. Without bitterness, without regret. Just gratitude for what it was. It's strange how endings never really end. Weeks passed after that night. We didn't text again. We didn't need to. There was nothing left to say, only everything left to feel. I started to notice small things again. The taste of coffee, the way sunlight hit my wall in the morning, the sound of my own laughter returning. I wasn't healing because I forgot. I was healing because I finally forgave myself for wanting more. Ethan sent one last message. A photo of the sunset from his balcony with the words, "Thought you'd like this. No questions, no confessions. Just a shared memory sent into the world one final time." I replied with a heart. Nothing more. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a quiet acknowledgement that what we had was real. And that was enough. I started writing again. Not about love, but about truth. About the spaces between people, the choices that shape us, the things we never say, but always mean. For the first time, I didn't write to be understood. I wrote to understand myself. Every word felt like a thread leading me back to peace, back to the version of me that could love without losing herself. Months later, I saw him again, just once from across the street. He didn't notice me, and I didn't call out. He looked content, older, steadier. I realized then that I didn't need him to look back for me to know I'd mattered. Love doesn't disappear, it transforms. It becomes a quiet warmth you carry into the next chapter, a reminder that you were brave enough to feel deeply, and strong enough to let go. If someone asked me now if I regret it, the love, the loss, the ache, I'd say no, because every piece of it made me more human. We weren't meant to last, but we were meant to change each other. And we did. Maybe that's what love really is. Not forever, not flawless. Just two people meeting at the right time to teach each other what truth feels like. I told him once I wanted to explore my options. What I didn't know was that he'd become the measure for them all. And even now, when I think of him, it doesn't hurt. It just glows.